Prep Test 71, Section 3, Number 18. A recent magazine article argued that most companies that do not already own video conferencing equipment would be wasting their money if they purchased it. However, they say, this is clearly not true. That's their conclusion, and I need to know why they think this is not true. Well, in a recent survey of businesses that have purchased such equipment, most of the respondents stated that the video conferencing equipment was well worth its cost. Yeah, the problem with that logic is just selection bias. I mean, it might have been the case that most of the people who did purchase such equipment had good reason for that. But it could also be the case that most companies that don't have it don't need it. Yeah, the people who bought it, they bought it because they're in that business. If you're me and you're in like LSAT teaching business where you have online students and stuff, maybe you do need some video conferencing equipment. But if other companies, like you got a fucking bagel store, maybe you don't need it. So even though people who have it say, yeah, I needed it, it was good, it could be that most people who don't have it don't need it. All right, so that's the flaw. So I just have to pick the one that accurately describes, here's what they did, and it's a problem. A says, concludes that something is worth its cost merely on the grounds that many businesses have purchased it. No, you're ignoring the... You're just ignoring the logic of the argument. I mean, that's not how it went. It didn't say, people bought it, therefore it must be justified. That's not what happens. Did it take a condition sufficient to justify purchasing costly equipment to be necessary in order? No, I don't think it's confusing sufficient for necessary. When they confuse sufficient for necessary, I spot it. I'm never surprised by that answer. I would have known that confusing sufficient for necessary was the answer. C, rejects a position merely on the grounds that an inadequate argument has been given for it. That's a really common, these days, a really common right answer is, I'm going to reject your conclusion because your argument sucked. Your conclusion is false. I'm gonna conclude the opposite of what you're concluding based solely on the fact that you made a shitty argument. That is a flaw, but that's just not the flaw that happened here. D, relies on a sample that it is reasonable to suppose is unrepresentative of the group about which it draws its conclusion. Their conclusion is about most businesses. Sorry, I got fire trucks going by. Damn. Their conclusion is about most businesses, and their evidence is about the companies that did purchase video conferencing equipment. So I said selection bias, which is another way of saying the sample might be unrepresentative, and so that's the answer. E, confuses cost with value. What? No. The answer is D because of the selection bias in the logic.